SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C Spire. Power your home or business with C Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C Spire. C Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Friday Eve.
All right, what's up with the SpaceX rockets this morning?
They were doing a static test, and it went kablooey.
Just seeing that.
Large fireball.
Yeah. The markets, of course, are closed today for the Juneteenth holiday.
The newest federal holiday.
Right. But the futures are in the red. Haven't really checked to see how much SpaceX, Tesla perhaps might be dragging down the futures, but you know they are. The Dow at this present moment, the futures, of course, not today, but this would be pre-opening tomorrow, down 313 points. All the indexes in the red. One metric, of course, we're watching is crude oil. It's up $1.97 to $77. You got to believe that we're poised to see at $77.11 that we're poised to see prices at the pump increase as a result of the increase in the price of oil per barrel, a globally traded commodity. This, of course, is based on traders' concerns about the chaos in the Middle East. I believe last report I saw, Rhino, the president is scheduled to meet with his team not too long from this point right now, today. Concluded a meeting yesterday where it is reported he reviewed a number of options for any sort of additional involvement by these United States in this situation in the Middle East. Overnight, we had bombs going in both directions, right? I think I saw that.
Which is a day that ends in Y at this point.
Yeah. So I guess you could say it's really no closer to any resolution.
It's closer to failure on Iran's part because the first few nights it was a whole bunch of rockets headed Israel's way, and last few days, it's been a dozen, maybe.
Yeah. I guess so.
In fairness, I believe it was reported one of those was their new super rocket. It's got 80 warheads on it. It got intercepted with one missile.
So did I read it right that a hospital, is that right, was bombed? I think that's true. In Israel, if I'm not mistaken. Or do I have that backwards?
No, I'm fairly certain it was in Israel.
Yeah. So, I believe I caught that. And, you know, it's hard to tell whether or not that was intentional or an ordinance that went awry, given the sender of the bomb, the launcher of this bomb being Iran. Don't think they got total control of all the technology used and the systems used to control and manage their military assets. But I wouldn't put it past them, though, would you, that they would strike a hospital?
I mean, yeah, the Ayatollah is getting more and more desperate, so I wouldn't put it past them, but I don't know. It doesn't feel like the conflict is at the point now where that's the level of desperation they would be to. I'm leaning more towards it was aimed somewhere else and didn't hit where it aimed.
Okay. Well, the reason I say that is because it kind of harkens back to the theory that Japan had under its imperial rule when they attacked Pearl Harbor, right? There's some historians that say they believed America would just surrender. We don't want any more. We can't take on the great emperor of Japan and their military might.
And part of that calculus was they believed by knocking out that much of the Western fleet, the Pacific Fleet, that we would have to capitulate because there would be no way we could manufacture ships fast enough to counter them. And that was a gross miscalculation on their part.
Yeah, and of course you would have to attribute that to the resolve and resiliency and the work ethic of the American people, because everybody was on board, as you recall. And America, I mean, in the private sector, the military, the government, it's sort of kind of depressing to think that it took war to bring the country, which typically that's what happens, the country, to unite the country more than without war and the threat of attack and the real, very real threat of America and American life. But that's what happened. Everybody got on board for the same purpose, and that was to defeat the enemy. And I think it's pretty clear, Japan, that was their goal, right? They wanted to fly the rising sun over the fruited plain.
Well, yeah, I mean, they had been opened up to the West and realized, oh, well, being this little isolationist island has put us a couple hundred years behind the eight ball. And when they saw that, and they saw how they were powerless to stop the Western powers from running roughshod over them, they were like, you know what? They built their money on empires. Why can't we?
Yeah.
Except the world was already moved past that point. That was what World War I was fought over.
Supposed to be the war to end all wars, right? World War I.
So because Japan was late to the party, people were opposed to their imperial aggression.
On the C Spire text line, America wasn't divided back then like it is now. I would agree with that. I would subscribe to that. It was a more homogeneous country in terms of its philosophy and its culture. I think that's true.
But there still were detractors.
That's right. I think the point I hear what the texters saying. It was a lot closer
to like 95% in favor or at least neutral about the war, and only like 5% that were against it in World War II.
Yeah. I think the point I'm trying to make, and it's just an opinion here, is that it seemed like people were more willing to sacrifice for the cause, for the purpose, and contribute and do their part.
Well, they'd also just come through the worst economic depression in living history at that point.
Yes.
So the promise of freedom and light at the end of the tunnel was a little bit more palatable. Or not palatable, more appealing,
well,
as far as an inspiration to be patriotic.
Let me take a stab at my thoughts on it. Something I've talked about before on the show is this concept of incumbency. And what I mean by that is, for generations, we, for the most part, haven't had to worry about another country just taking over ours. we really haven't been on the brink of economic depression. I mean, we've had some ups and downs, not like that, though. I mean, we haven't seen bread lines in this country. We haven't seen people who even achieved affluence who lost it all, as they did.
They still read Grapes of Wrath in school?
I don't know, but they should. And so I guess the point I'm making is...
They can skip the chapter about the turtle. It's just a whole chapter. Turtle crosses the road.
That's true. I saw one this morning, by the way, that I helped along its way. My wife said you're always supposed to keep them going in the same direction, right? That they have some radar that they're going somewhere, and you want to keep them going in that direction.
And don't assume they want to be in a pond.
Right, exactly
Very
right.
few of them actually want to be there.
So I guess what I'm saying is about this concept of incumbency, your point is well taken. The people around during that period, talking about when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, weren't too far removed from a period where we didn't have that incumbency. You really were worried about, how am I going to eat? Weren't too far removed from that. Today, we're pretty far removed from that. That's not to say there aren't people that have various struggles, but for the most part, we got all kinds of societal assistance. Something else you said about baby boomers I'll get to later that caught my attention. Lee Yancey, a member of the Mississippi House, is next.
Family Termite is Mississippi.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's do this.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Let's go.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. That's Led Zeppelin bumping us into this segment. Somebody sent me a reel, Rhino, of a amateur guitarist that did a collage where they played the guitar riffs to like about 20 Led Zeppelin songs. It was pretty good, actually. Of course, John Paul Jones, right? No, he wasn't the guitarist. Who the heck was the guitarist? He was pretty good. I know, I can't remember.
Jimmy Page.
Jimmy Page, thank you. John Paul Jones, the keyboards. And a number of instruments John Paul Jones played. He was
miscellaneous.
Yeah, a genius. It's Lee Yancey. He's a member of the Mississippi House in the Element Wealth studio. Represents District 74. That's Rankin County. Is this still right, Lee? Chair of the House Business and Commerce Committee.
It is current as of today.
There's been a little musical chairs going on, right, with the chairmanships.
So far, I'm just holding on to my chair as hard as I can.
All right. Well, welcome. So, 2025, the legislative session, I think it's fair to say not one where we saw just a huge amount of bills that crossed the finish line, but some were certainly pivotal, were substantial. The tax bill, for sure, huge legislation. You were involved in some that dealt with some of the regulations around drugs and substances and so forth. You're kind of known for that because you chaired the drug committee a couple of years ago, right?
That's right.
And it was under your leadership as the chairman of that committee that Mississippi enacted the medical marijuana legislation. So just start by giving us your kind of high-level overview of the 2025 session.
So I think if you're looking at it from 25,000 feet up, when you look back at this session 10 years from now, you're not going to see anything other than the income tax repeal. In 15 years, we will not have an income tax here in Mississippi. It's going to take a while to phase it out, assuming all these growth triggers are met, and they should be at only 0.85% per
easy,
year.
pretty low bar.
Pretty low bar for us to meet, only 2 times since the Great Depression have we not reached that bar. One was the Great Depression. The other was one of the years during World War II. So we can safely say the income tax is on the way out, unless there's change, by the legislature in the future. So that'll be the hallmark of what this session accomplished. We just finished a special session where we completed the budget. And the reason we had to have a special session was because of the disagreement over the income tax repeal and the way that it all happened, and it just personalities perhaps got in the way of us completing our work on time in a timely fashion. But we did get the budget done. Income tax reform was certainly big. Legislative redistricting, often people don't think about that, but there are 15 members of the legislature who have to run again this year. The court ruled that we didn't have enough majority-minority districts, and so precincts had to be swapped around in different districts, and every time you move one precinct on one side, you're affecting 3 or 4 other districts. And so everyone whose district changed at all has to run again this year, primary in August, a general election in November. So that was a big part of this year. We finally got a little bit of certificate of need law passed. It wasn't enough, but it was something, and it allows for medical facilities to get a CON when purchasing medical equipment, raise the bar on that, so that you don't have to get permission to do something every time you try to expand or you try to do something different. But there's still too much red tape in the healthcare business, and having to jump through hoops in order to protect those who are currently in the business. So, all in all, it was a great session. The Jackson Revitalization Committee was one of the special committees appointed by Speaker White last year, and every single bill that we worked on to try and help Jackson was passed by the House and Senate and signed into law by the governor. One involved camping on public property. It disallowed that. Redevelopment of blighted properties with tax incentives for developers, House Bill 1201. There was a bill that dealt with squatters. How do you get rid of a squatter who's on your rental property that's not paying? And there was no procedure for doing that that was effective, and so we made that easier. House Bill 733 created a property cleanup revolving fund, up to 15 grants to any local government entity, about $2,000 per grant for them to be able to clean up properties. And then House Bill 1197 was a Safe Solicitation Act. These panhandlers that you see every time you get off of the interstate in Jackson now have to have a permit in order to panhandle. And nobody can be taken to prison, but you can be removed from the spot, and if you don't have a permit. So just trying to deal with some of the practical things, not only in Jackson but in other parts of the state, that deal with property values and having a safe environment for families, and trying to keep our crime rate low.
Well, you didn't mention the direct shipment of wine.
Well, we do. We have a direct shipment of wine this year. It's a bill that's been discussed. It was a bill that my next door neighbor for 20 years, it was the only bill he cared about, and it just kept not passing for various reasons, mostly because the liquor stores opposed it. But now the Senate, after much deliberation, passed a version of it, and the House jumped on it in order to bring us out of the prohibition era. Mississippi was one of only 3 states that prohibited direct shipment of wine until this year. So 47 other states allowed it, and it just seemed like making someone drive was not the better alternative if there were other safeguards in place. And so we made it where it would be taxed, and you had to be 21 to order it.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff, many things I think most people don't think about, but are still good bills. The squatter bill's kind of interesting because we saw lots of problems in the rest of the country, in particular, where squatters were taking hold of folks' property, and they really didn't have a good remedy to that. And in fact, in many cases, there was no remedy, and their laws came down in favor of the squatter rather than the property owner.
Right.
So we've cleaned that up.
Cleaned
I don't
it
know
up.
that there's widespread incidents of that in the state, but it doesn't matter. We need to take care of it and preempt it.
I've certainly heard of a number of instances. Quite a few legislators are, in the real estate business and have rental property, and it was very personal to them. The way I understand it, if you have someone squatting, you notify law enforcement who, within 24 hours, would let the squatter know they have 3 days to appeal to either a municipal court or a justice court. And if they haven't done that in that period of time, then they have to be out. And so it allows law enforcement to help remove them within a certain period of time.
Okay. So you'd have to say overall that's good legislation. The CON, we keep sort of opening the door on that. So we've opened it up a little bit, got some reform, but of course that stops short of full repeal of those statutes. Just doesn't seem like there's an appetite for that. I know you've personally worked a lot on that effort.
I don't know that we're ever going to get full repeal of CON laws. These laws put in place in the 1970s through a federal law that was later repealed because it was shown to not be effective. States hung on to those to prevent competition among healthcare providers. What we need in Mississippi is more access to care. We need better care. We need more affordable care. And I believe that comes through competition. In most cases, there may be certain cases where if all the payers are government payers like Medicaid or Medicare, and there's a certain price reimbursement, there's not a lot of room to be competitive on the price. Perhaps nursing homes, that kind of thing. But anyone who's competing for insurance-based care or out-of-pocket care would certainly benefit from having more competition.
Okay. We got a break. If you can hang around, we keep
Absolutely.
talking. All right. We got Lee Yancey. He's a member of the Mississippi House, represents Rankin County. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Siebert Paint.
Bring it on.
Middays with Gerard Gibert
It is on.
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back in the Element Wealth studio. It's Representative Lee Yancey with the Doobie Brothers bumping us into this segment. Okay, so correct for our listeners, we got a text on the break. The CON legislation didn't make it across the finish line.
Let me give a shout out to my friend Forrest Thigpen.
Yeah, Empower Mississippi.
Yeah, the CON law was vetoed by Governor Reeves on an unrelated matter that dealt with another hospital, but so we still are trying to get CON laws passed.
Right.
So, again, uphill battle to get our conservative legislation done.
And he made the point, he made a statement, did the governor, concerning his veto. He said, I've been a champion for increased competition and more health care delivery options in our state by knocking down barriers to entry. But there was a provision, right, that he had concerns about. He said it was an 11th hour floor amendment added in the state Senate.
It gave an unfair advantage to one particular group,
Right.
And it shouldn't have been in the bill,
Right.
But
So he vetoed it
he vetoed
as a
it.
result.
He did.
So we're back to the drawing board
Now we'll start over
on that.
like we do on so many bills. We'll start over and learn from this year and years past as to what the reasons were, and keep adapting and overcoming, and we'll get to the finish line ultimately.
Well, as I've said so many times on the show, that in Mississippi we're conservative and we're all about free enterprise, except when it comes to health care and alcohol sales and education, allowing the citizens to redress their government at the ballot, retail sales of vehicles. Other than that, we're all about free markets.
People like the idea of being conservative. It's the practical. People
always a sacred cow.
People
that gets
get
in the
used
way.
to their perks and what they get out of preferential treatment. So.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's where we are. You want to talk about the tax bill? What your thoughts are about that? You just mentioned in the last segment we got a bill that will phase out the income tax. It'll take a few years,
sure.
But that's at least what the bill.
Well, it's a very conservative way to phase out the state income tax. Over the next, I believe it's over the next 4 years. We are going to go from 4.4 down to 3% in 2030. Then additional cuts will come down based on the triggers. There'll be 3% of income tax left at 2030. So over the next 10 years, it will be lowered 0.3% per year until it is fully eliminated in 2040 is the way that I understand it.
Actually, up to 0.3% per year.
Based on the trigger.
The triggers.
Yeah,
right.
If the trigger's met.
There are 3 different levels.
But like we said, the trigger has been met every year since the Great Depression, except for 2 years.
And especially with the drafting error, don't think we'll find any problem achieving the triggers.
That's right.
That's targets.
Right. As part of that bill, the grocery tax will be reduced from 7% to 5% starting on July 1st. Then you'll also see a 9-cent increase in the fuel tax phased in over the next 3 years at 3 cents per year. That will go directly to roads and bridges, MDOT's fund. That will be an appropriation that will not have to come out of in the general fund budget, but will just be directed to them, and will give us a really more effective way to keep up with our road and bridge infrastructure. I firmly believe that bringing new jobs and opening up our state by having the best possible road and bridge system that we can have creates more jobs, brings more, more enlightenment to parts of our state that maybe have been isolated, creates economic development opportunities. Our governor's done a great job of attracting business. All our governors have for the last 20 years, attracting business to the state. And our universities are offering the kinds of educational training that will maybe keep more of our students in the state to combat the brain drain, where we have our brightest students getting their degrees and moving somewhere else. We're trying to keep them here. And I just think Mississippi's best days are ahead.
Yeah, and I would agree. We need to call out the governor and offer some praise to the governor for being hyper-focused on economic development, and certainly the numbers bear out a good bit of success there when you look at the capital investment that's flowing into the state as a result of really a complete team effort, no doubt about it, at the local level, at the state level, and certainly in the governor's mansion as well. But this is something that gets his attention, that he recognizes as a crucial role for the governor, and so I think we have to give him some props for being a champion in that perspective.
Absolutely, and also would be remiss if I didn't mention what a great job MDA is doing.
Yeah,
Bill Cork has been fantastic. He's a great ambassador for our state, and really doing a wonderful job of attracting these really quality businesses.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, so we got this tax legislation through. It sort of took a little pulling on the Senate there, and the Senate had their own version, which had triggers that were a little different than what finally passed the finish line due to the error. But nonetheless, it went to the governor's desk, it got passed, and here we are. Let me ask you this. Are you and your colleagues concerned about possible budgetary challenges as we are facing a period where we've got less income, down to no income, to the state from the income tax?
Well, I think that was definitely the Senate's position, that they were trying to protect the budget. You know, in the House, we felt like that we have had $1 billion surplus each year for the last 3 or 4 years, and we're obviously taking too much money from the taxpayer. I believe that when you start to eliminate the income tax and leave more money in the taxpayer's pocket, you're going to see some saving, but you're going to see a lot of spending too. And so the sales tax numbers will increase over the next 15 years, and I fully expect to see that money replaced from moving it from a work-based tax, a productivity-based tax, to a use tax, so that now you'll be taxed on the things that you choose to use, and your productivity will not be punished as a result of you being, a good steward of what God's given you and a good mind. What's the incentive to go out and produce if the government's just going to take more and more and more of it away from you? So you create jobs. You have lots more people who are getting a paycheck, who are going to buy groceries and buy goods and services throughout our economy that make Mississippi stronger and stronger as we continue to grow and expand, and just see these sales tax dollars come in. And that's how we need to grow our economy, through business growth.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we've got a federal government that is debating the one big beautiful bill, and that could have consequences to the state in terms of the funding that the state receives from Washington. Is this something you and your colleagues are tracking, paying attention to, that might figure into future budgetary negotiations?
Well, we certainly want to try and keep our eyes on what's going on in Washington, but you can't base your future on what might happen. You try to plan for the worst and hope for the best, but we have a lot going on in Mississippi, and the more we are able to grow beyond where we are, being so dependent on the federal government, I would like to see Mississippi, be able to become less dependent on Washington and rely more on our own productivity. So I think that's happening. I think it's beginning to happen, and you're seeing more people get a quality education, more people enter the workforce. We are working hard on areas like workforce development. We've talked about all the jobs that are coming in and trying to keep people in Mississippi. The more we can move away from being dependent on the federal government, the better.
Yeah, I totally agree. The most dependent, either 49th or 50th, depending on the year, in terms of the amount of money we send to Washington versus the amount of money we receive in return. A big chunk of that's Medicaid. You know that. It's now approaching $8 billion coming down from the federal government, and that's without Medicaid expansion. We're heavily reliant on that. And that's what concerns me, Lee, is that the federal government, as you know, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, is toying around with that quite a bit, making reforms to Medicaid.
Yeah, our state portion of Medicaid is $969 million.
Almost $1 billion.
Almost $1 billion. And it is the second highest line item in our budget.
Behind education.
Behind K through 12 education.
That's exactly right.
So K through 12 education is $3.34 billion.
Yeah.
And all you hear is a cry for more money.
Yeah.
Over and over and over.
But this year we appropriated less because the number of students, the enrollment's down.
That's right. A 0.4% decrease from last year.
I mean, it's basically level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the top 5 items take up 82% of our budget. Education, Medicaid, universities, community college, Department of Corrections.
Hang on, we keep talking. We got another segment.
All right.
Yep, we got Lee Yancey in the Element Well studio.
I'm Ed Evans.
Are we going to do this?
Middays with Gerard Gibert
Keep rolling. 3, 2, 1.
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
But I couldn't take punishment and hide.
We are back in the Element Wealth Studio. It's Representative Lee Yancey. He represents nearby Rankin County. So here's a question for you, Representative Yancey. So we got the tax bill passed. We got direct shipment of wine. Didn't really make any progress on the CON legislation because the governor vetoed that due to a last-minute provision inserted by the Senate, and he vetoed it as a result. Here are a couple of things that I hear a lot. Get your take on. The ballot initiative is something that many would like to see restored. That's passed the House a couple of times, right? And then dies in the Senate.
Yeah, we continue to pass it in the House. I don't remember it being brought up this year.
Not this year,
but in the 2 years prior to that, we were trying to get it passed. People have a right to vote on issues, and I don't particularly like the constitutional change that was allowed in the first one, but I do like being able to vote on issues, bills, up or down. Changing the Constitution is just very, very difficult because if there was anything, people vote emotionally on an issue without looking at the fine print of how it's written, and you get something like that in your Constitution that needs to be fixed, and then it takes you moving hell and high water to get it done, and so. But being able to have a ballot initiative where you could put something on the ballot that would be in our statutes, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Representative Price Wallace, I think, early on abandoned the idea, said he just didn't think that the votes were there between both chambers to get something going and really didn't pursue it any further.
Well, I think the Senate had, kind of said it was dead on arrival.
Yeah.
So, many times I've worked on bills that were easily passed through the House, but the Senate refused to take up, or a particular chairman in the Senate refused to take up. And so you have one person. You feel like if your bill could get to the floor, you could easily pass it, but sometimes there's one person in the way who can block it, who can pocket veto it, and not even bring it up in committee, therefore killing it.
I think that happens more than people are aware.
Happens all the time.
Yeah. Mobile sports betting is such an example, if I'm not mistaken, that the chairman in the Senate, David Blunt, pocket vetoed that legislation again.
Sure. Mobile sports betting is something that is going on all over our state in all 82 counties, and it's already legal in the casinos. You go to the casino, you can place your bets. But you have to physically go to the casino, but it's not regulated. What's going on throughout our state is not regulated. It's not taxed. We have some players involved in this industry who are kind of shady characters, and we just don't have our eyes on it. And so my view is anything that we have in our state like that ought to be properly regulated, properly taxed. Let them, have the same, rate of doing business as everyone else, and let our state benefit from it in some way through our general fund. As I said, we've got a $7.1 billion budget, and this is a use tax. People who don't do it don't have to pay it. So why not regulate it so that we can keep our eyes on it, try to keep the shady characters out, and let it be something that would be beneficial to the state.
What's on the boards for next year, do you see at this point?
So next year, I think our speaker is focused on school choice, making it a big issue next year. I think that we will continue looking at budget efficiencies and try and find ways that we can be more conservative with the taxpayer money. I'm always mindful that none of the money that is in our state budget just came off of a money tree or just appeared, but it actually came from someone's hard work. And I want to be mindful of that, and I want to try and spend that money as best we possibly can. And so I want to be more efficient with the taxpayer dollar.
I inadvertently omitted that from my list of protectionist policies in Mississippi. That may be the most protectionist. Certainly the group that squawks the most about protecting their fiefdom would be the education establishment. So we're being surrounded by states, as you know, that are moving forward with even universal school choice. We can't even get plain old public-to-public open enrollment.
That's correct, and there are lots of reasons for that, and I think there needs to be more education, across our state. I have some concerns about it too, and I would like for my questions to be answered as well. But again, it's happening all around us, and it appears to be something that is going to sweep the nation. It's going to be the new way of doing education.
If you want to stay through the break, we can continue the conversation on that. I want to talk about that in Kratom. You want to talk about that?
Okay.
We got Representative Lee Yancey in the Element Wealth studio.
Your home
Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio on this
Friday Eve.
We're visiting with Representative Lee Yancey. He serves in the House of Representatives, of course, represents Rankin County, serves as the chair of the House Business and Commerce Committee. So, Lee, let's talk about the school choice again, if you don't mind. This is a controversial topic, and it's something we've talked about quite a bit on the program. We've visited with numerous members of the legislature, both chambers. And the speaker, let's just put it this way, the speaker is a proponent of school choice. The lieutenant governor is not. And I think that's why we can't get anything across the finish line. We had legislation this year that made it out of the House that would have provided parents of kids in public school with the ability to transfer to the public school of their choice. That it would have prohibited the transfer or the transferring school. It's referred to as the transfer or, I think, in the legislation. That is the homeschool. Would have prohibited them from blocking such a transfer, which is something they can do today. You can go apply for a transfer now, but both institutions have to agree to it. Typically, the homeschool doesn't agree to that because they lose the money from the state associated with that student. So that passes. It's Representative Jansen Owen's bill. Goes down to the Senate, and Senator Dennis DeBar pocket vetoes it.
And that's the power of a chairman. Let me say this. I'm a public school product of Mississippi. I started kindergarten in Tupelo at Pierce Street. Then we moved to New Orleans for my dad to go to seminary. I went to public school down there. In 3rd grade, came back to Tupelo and went to Thomas Street Elementary. Then 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade, Saltillo Public Schools. And then we moved to Quitman down in Clark County, 7th grade through 12th grade. My mother is a retired 1st grade teacher in the public schools. I'm a big advocate for public schools. My kids went to Northwest Rankin. So I'm very concerned that there are kids, we have schools all over the state ranked A, B, C, D, F. And kids who are in D or F schools, I don't know that there's anyone who's not sympathetic to a child who is in one of those schools who would like to have a better opportunity, or the parents of one of those childs in those schools who would like for their child to have a better opportunity. So the question is, should we continue to use school district lines as the boundary for what school your child has to go to? And I don't want to do anything to hurt public schools, and I don't want to go against what Rankin County wants. So I'm listening. All politics is local, so I'm listening to my superintendents, listening to my principals, but I also want to make sure that I understand when we say school choice, there are thousands of iterations of what that might be.
Absolutely.
And so this past year, House Bill 1435 would have made a process already in Mississippi law for a child to transfer between public schools slightly easier by removing the veto power of the school the child wants to leave. That's all it would have done. The receiving school would still have to receive them. They don't have to receive them, but they have to determine if they have the capacity to receive them. And so do they have enough room? Do they want to keep their class sizes a certain size? All those things. A receiving school can make all of those rules. Another bill was House Bill 1617, commonly referred to as the Tim Tebow Act. I think most people out there know who Tim Tebow is. He was the great quarterback at the University of Florida, and he was a homeschool student in high school and junior high and elementary, but they allowed him to play public school sports. So all the Tim Tebow bill would have done was to allow homeschool students to participate in public school sports. And that probably wouldn't affect 2 or 3 people per county. I don't know how many it would affect. How many are as good as Tim Tebow that would want to do that? But I didn't see that as affecting that many people, and I felt like that was a great opportunity for those who chose homeschool and possibly for those in the public school to have someone like Tim Tebow,
talented athlete,
be there.
Yeah.
And then there was House Bill 1432 sought to expand where public charter schools could be open in C-rated districts.
Right.
So across the board, it's the easiest thing to do is to just stick with the status quo and not do anything different, particularly if you have all A-level schools. I think the fear in Rankin County is that your better students might move within the school district to a different school, and then the people coming in are coming from a C, D, or F rated district, and it may or may not bring your school down as far as a grade level. So there's just a lot of fear with the change, and if we're talking about school choice, we need to know exactly what we're talking about, because there are lots of different bills.
How did you vote for the portability bill, Representative Jansen Owens' bill that would again precluded the home district from blocking the transfer to another? How did you vote?
So that was House Bill 1435,
right?
And I think the entire Rankin delegation voted no on that bill because we were listening to our superintendents and principals, and we want, like I said, all politics is local, and we want to, if we're going to do this, we all need to do it together, I think, and move in the same, all be pulling the cart in the same direction. Because I can assure you, superintendents and principals in Rankin County who work in education every day know a lot more about it than I do. But at the same time, I also want us to know what are we really rejecting here? Is this something that would hurt us, or would this be something that, in a limited way, would allow us to take a few more students that would really be a game changer for them for life?
If President Trump issued a Truth Social tweet, actually it would just be a post on Truth Social. If he put a post out that said, I think the Republicans in the state of Mississippi who oppose school choice should change their mind and vote in favor of it, what do you think would happen?
I can't speak for what everyone else would do, but I am more concerned about what my district thinks than anyone else in any other place. The people of District 74 are the ones who elect me. I want to make the best decisions that I can based on the information that I have in front of me, and I want to make sure that we have talked through these issues that affect people who are in that field. And so, again, I don't see that it would be super harmful or harmful at all to do some of this, but again, I want to learn. I want to know all I can know about it. I want to look at what's happening in Texas and look at what's happening in Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee. All of our surrounding states are doing this. they're doing it. And I want to see, is this hurting their school systems? Is this helping their school systems? Is this giving kids a greater opportunity? Are they taking advantage of it? Are the parents transporting their kids every day to these schools and back? Because the bus is not going to come pick you up if you live outside the district line.
Right.
So, is this something that is really working, or is it a gimmick? Or is this something that's not working? So again, I'm sort of in that phase where I'm trying to discover what is the value of school choice.
It feels like that the education folks, superintendents, principals, you talked about your constituents and so forth, when they are part of thriving school districts, they don't want school choice. When they're outside of thriving school districts, they're more inclined to support it.
Again, it's the idea of if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And if you're an A-rated school now, what is it going to make you a B-rated school if you do this? I don't know. But those are the kinds of questions that they are asking. Does this create more disciplinary problems? Does this create? But the fact that they can determine if they have capacity to receive puts all the power in their court, but I think they're afraid of a lawsuit if they don't take students who are wanting to transfer in.
Got you. And I think it's fair to say that certainly in central Mississippi, we have the same situation in Madison County, that Madison County, Rankin County, the Clinton Public Schools, they're concerned about JPS, they're concerned about Canton Public Schools and other nearby districts that don't perform very well, students trapped in those schools, that they would seek enrollment in the better performing districts, and they want to prohibit that.
Correct.
Want to block that. It's pretty much what you're hearing,
yes.
Right? Yeah,
yes.
They're worried about property values and all that sort of stuff. The other states seem to be able to do that, though, so I know that'll be an ongoing
we continue to wrestle with it every year.
Yep. All right. Appreciate it, Lee. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so awesome.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Well studio. So a lot of stuff going on, watching the Dow futures. Apparently the president is about to begin his meeting, is what I'm seeing, Rhino, with his advisors in the Situation Room to talk about what moves, if any, the United States should take with respect to this situation in the Middle East with Iran and Israel. Interesting to see what the outcome of that may be. So I think that's got investors worried, nervous, as they should be. Just instability is always going to trigger them. So appreciate Representative Lee Yancey for coming in and staying more than a couple of segments there. Enjoyed the conversation in between sessions, of course, and winding up the conversation. It really didn't get to the kratom stuff. We'll get that later. But you heard him say that likely school choice will become the priority issue for the House, the Speaker, in the next session. I think it's fair to say eliminating the income tax was the priority in the 25 session. That has been achieved for all intents and purposes. So now the attention turns, I think, to school choice. He is an advocate of it, a proponent. Mississippi, as you heard Representative Yancey state, is being surrounded by states who have implemented robust school choice programs, the latest Texas. That was a really big get for the school choice movement, universal school choice. Now, something that happened in Texas that is, I think, was critical and really made a difference was the governor took that issue as a priority. And I know this governor supports, our governor, Tate Reeves, supports school choice as well. But I think the last couple of years, it's fair to say, Rhino, his focus has been on the income tax. He really has adopted that as his number one policy priority. That's out of the way. So what happens with respect to school choice? Does that get elevated to that level now? Does that become his top priority, as I think it will be the speaker's? I'm not sure at this point. I haven't talked to him about it. But Governor Abbott in Texas, at first he got mad when they couldn't get it through due to opposition by Republicans. And he made a concerted effort to seek alternative candidates to these incumbents, and he prevailed. I think there were 18 races, and he prevailed in like 15 of them, if I'm not mistaken, which flipped the numbers in the legislature in Texas to get the legislation through. But to get support from the voters so that he could flip those seats, he was doing road trips across the state. And you heard Representative Yancey say there's so much misinformation about it, misunderstanding, that the governor himself took on that responsibility, went across the state, conducting town halls, speaking directly to the voters, explaining school choice in districts that before his meetings, his explanations, and fielding questions, I'm told. I've read reports about this. I don't have any video of those events, but these are credible Texas media sources, by the way, that he was good to stay and field questions. Not just a one-way, let me tell you about it, okay, I got to go, vote for this person sort of deal. And that's what really turned around the situation in Texas. Had new blood running for these offices, voters who were satisfied with the governor's explanation, and really gained an understanding about the programs that before his meetings they didn't have. You know what they were getting was barraged with the fear-mongering. Same thing happens in Mississippi, right? We've got all these people that are trying to protect their domains.
Their little fiefdoms.
And they just spew the worst of the worst of the worst. Honestly, it's out of the Democrat playbook. Is it not? It's right out of the Democrat playbook.
Which maybe I should twirl my mustache and have it curl up like an evildoer, but that may be a bit of an exaggeration. But something came to mind while you were saying that. If school choice does become, or looks like it's going to become, the priority for the House and the governor in the next legislative session, and you were an opponent of school choice, your best line of defense would likely be to try to stir up support for a contrasting priority such as the ballot initiative.
That's a good point. Hadn't thought about that as a strategy.
Because it seems like the legislature can only really do one thing at a time. Or at least one major thing. Lots of little minor things that don't require people to read into a whole lot, but really only get one major thing done at a time.
Well, certainly based on past experience, it's a fair assessment that you make there. Certainly is. Well, I wonder, and that's why I asked the question, and I talked to Lee a little bit, and I'm not talking out of school here. I'll talk to him a little bit during the break before he exited about the possible influence of the president. The president is a proponent of school choice. He's made statements to that effect, and they're carefully crafted statements that essentially promote the value and the benefits of choice. It's not something that at this point he has inserted himself into, certainly in Mississippi, but it does make you wonder, given that this state is so pro-Trump, that if he came out and said, if he started calling out legislators, heck, today you probably saw it, he posted on his Truth Social platform earlier an incredibly lambasting post of the Fed chairman. They had their meeting yesterday, no action. Woo! He's really upset about that. I mean, he just took him to task in this post. I did a screenshot
I think that's
of it.
partially because the excuse given for no action was they're still waiting to see what the tariffs are going to do.
That's right. And he would argue that we already know because the tariffs are in place. I'll tell you that I'm in the middle on that. I still think there's more impact from the tariffs coming. What that's going to be, I don't know. It's hard to wrap your head around. And this is kind of getting off the subject of school choice, but okay, we don't see that necessarily playing out at the cash register. How much is being absorbed by the exporters that we buy from? How much is being absorbed by the American importers who pay the tariffs? Just don't know at this point. How much is still a function of pent-up inventory, forward purchased inventory in advance that has yet to filter through the system, and thus we haven't really seen the effect of the tariffs because new product subject to the tariff hasn't flowed into the country yet. So still a lot of unknowns, but Powell's statements were weak, and I think that's what the president's frustrated with. He predicted 3 to 4% inflation as a result of tariffs before the end of the year, is what Powell said. Therefore, no inclination to cut rates. And the president, of course, now calls him too late Jerome Powell. He says it's costing our country hundreds of billions. So my point is, what if he targeted the president, members of our legislature who vote no on school choice reform? What if he targeted them and started calling them out on his Truth Social platform? Would that move the needle?
A little bit.
I'm not sure. I mean, and I'm honestly not sure. I haven't talked to them specifically.
Well,
but
just basing on the obstinance of some of the anti-school choice people, I think they would just dig in.
Could be. And that you may be right. And I believe they would determine whether or not their vote with the president would be more beneficial to them politically than voting against it if it's, as Representative Yancey said, consistent with the wishes of their constituents. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Seabrook Paint.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. On the 662, how is the state going to keep up with who orders wine from out of state so they can collect the sales tax? And will the state mark it up 27.5% in addition. So the way it works is any operator, any winery out of state has to obtain a license from the Department of Revenue, just like an in-state liquor maker would, creator would, and they're subject to all the same taxes as a result of that. And they have to keep those records and supply those that data, those documents, those reports to the Department of Revenue. That's the 15.5% tax collected on the shipment, and then the Mississippi ABC, the Alcoholic Beverage Control, also has a 3% markup. So everything's the same as far as the taxability and the taxes collected and the licensing to sell in the state. No different between an in-state and out-of-state winery. It's just that we're allowing out-of-state to ship directly to the consumer. Actually, we're allowing in-state as well, right, to ship directly. The point is you can go directly to the consumer.
Which we've already had delivery available in the state.
And it's limited, we should add this caveat, to wines not already carried by the licensed wholesalers in the state. So there is an exception for what I think they call highly allocated wines, something like that. It seems to be the terminology I'm recalling. So it's a good question, but in of course the legislature did address all that, because that's been the problem historically, is that we built our revenue model around a significant amount of taxes collected at various points in the distribution process of alcohol. And so it's easy to say the state needs to get out of the alcohol business. I get it, and I'm for that as well. But then it's like, okay, where do we get that $90 million of revenue from that we don't get anymore? We're turning that over.
But why were the taxes put on alcohol, and why were the taxes so steep put on alcohol?
To protect the bootleggers.
It was more of a moral deterrence or a financial deterrence for a moral ill.
There's a lot of truth to that, especially if you look at the history of the state, when the idea of consuming alcohol or gambling and other things like that were...
But no, the government's never taxing you to punish you, right?
Of course, these are the very people that after passing those laws would meet after work and consume alcohol and gamble.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the prohibition was just a prohibition for the little people.
Yeah. So that's how that works. Mike from Columbus says Chuck Schumer has called a meeting to discuss Iran options for next week. I do believe that will be ex post facto epitome of the party. Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Well, they've been too focused on showing up unannounced to detention centers to get their 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And they're really irrelevant.
Secretly hoping that someone will come outside so that they can then try to get arrested so that they can really get their fame.
Unbelievable. On the C Spire text line, please ask for the rationale of cutting the income tax with the public retirement employee system underwater.
Because there's a whole bunch of people that aren't in PERS that pay income tax.
And would like more money in their pocket. So what you heard Lee talk about that, he started with the discussion of surpluses that have been created in the state. And that's true. We have enjoyed tidy surpluses the last, 4 or 5 years. This year, the projection was a surplus of about $600 million. And we talked about this yesterday based on the latest reports from the Department of Revenue, with 1 month, that being this month, remaining for collections. It does appear we won't achieve the projected $600 million surplus, but we could be surprised for this month. It's hard to predict. Looks like that may be cut in half, but that's the starting point. And then beyond that, it's the belief, you heard Lee talk about it, that cutting the income tax would be a key factor in growing the state's economy. And in growing the state's economy, we'd see more consumption, and that would produce more sales taxes, which accounts for, by the way, 38% of the revenue to the state. Personal income taxes account for about 29%. So that's the rationale, that's the premise, that's the thesis of eliminating the income tax. With respect to PERS, really the only thing that happened in this legislative session concerning PERS and its unfunded liability is the creation of a new tier. Tier 5, that legislation championed by Senator Daniel Sparks, it has been met with lots of controversy, to say the least. There was no direct cash infusion into the program. I did run into the state treasurer, David McRae, a couple of days ago at an event, and he shared with me, he, of course, as the treasurer, in accordance with our Constitution, he is a board member of the Public Employees Retirement System. And he told me that the return on investment for this year is better than the target 7%. Not surprised. It's been a good year for the markets. So that's good news. That helps out some. And I think the portfolio of PERS has been well managed. And I say that if you just look at the last 10 years ROI on the assets invested, that has been better, honestly, than average S&P returns. And so it's you got to be happy about that, but there's still a big hole that's got to be filled. And that is certainly appreciated by the legislature. Unfortunately, nothing really significant happened this year except as a starting point creating this Tier 5. And it's a hybrid defined benefit, defined contribution program. We'll see how that plays out. I'm hearing on the street many public sector employers are indicating it could make it more difficult for them to hire new employees, that the benefit's not as strong as the pure defined PERS benefit program. This hybrid is not as attractive, and so they may need to adjust their pay, their wages paid to employees to attract them to employment. Greg in Newton says 9% gas tax with all the money going to MDOT, that gives them more money to waste. MDOT is the biggest waste of taxpayers' money Mississippi has. I disagree, Greg, in Newton, Mississippi. The first thing to keep in mind is that the vast majority of the construction of new roads and bridges and maintenance of new roads and bridges is actually outsourced to third-party contractors take care of the lion's share contractors of that work. So what you'd be saying, Greg, is that those contractors are a waste. I think they would take exception to that, and those are all competitively bid, by the way. Now, it is true that because there are fewer of these companies in our state that want to do this kind of work with MDOT, that and there's more demand outside of MDOT for their services, that you could argue that perhaps less competition means that they're selling those services to the state at a higher price point because they just got, again, less threat of competition. We are stepping aside for a break. It's the final segment of Hour 2. When we come back, In the next hour, it's Danielle Morgan, Executive Director of the Mississippi Tourism Association.
Up of Mississippi.
Come on.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Now that the smoke's gone and the air is all clear, those who were right there got a new kind of fear.
Welcome back, everyone, to Middays from the Element Well studio. Herschel and Laurel says, why does Mr. Yancey and the other politicians feel they know more or have a better solution than all the states who have implemented free choice in education? I don't want to speak for any of them, obviously, but this is my take on it. I don't know that it's because they think they know more, and I tend to agree with you that anytime you have government control of an issue like this, a matter such as this, a system such as this, it certainly does project that way, that government is better equipped and more adept, better positioned, suited to make decisions about and on behalf of parents, caretakers, and their children's education than are the parents and caretakers themselves. I agree, and it's a good way to describe the opposition to education freedom. However, if you heard what Representative Yancey said, and I do believe this to be the case, Rhino, and you may have a different take on it, they're responding to what, at least from their perspective, are the wishes of their constituents. They get beat up, I can tell you, by superintendents, school board members, parents who oppose a school choice in their districts. It's a highly unpopular idea in the thriving districts around the state. If you look at the
specifically to the educators working in those districts.
No doubt about it. But even to many parents as well who fear.
I think it's more split down the middle for the parents.
I would agree, but it depends on the parents. I mean, there are a lot of different exceptions to it, I think it's fair to say. And they're not as vocal as you know this,
Bingo.
As the superintendents, as the education administrators, as the even those in the Department of Education, honestly. They may get mad for me calling them out. I don't care. They believe that their function is to advocate for public schools, and I believe they're wrong in this thinking, but they believe that choice harms public schools. I disagree. So I hear you, Herschel, but I can just tell you, I've been in the Capitol, and I'm not, hope you don't take that the wrong way. I'm not fussing at you whatsoever. I'm sharing with you my personal experiences in the Capitol with members of the legislature when this legislation they know is on the docket that day being considered in committee on the floor, only in the House on the floor, because in the Senate it never even gets on the floor in the dang committee because one Senator, Dennis DeBar, who heads the Education Committee in the Senate, pocket vetoes it, won't put it on the table. But I've been with them, just letting you know, Herschel, that, and they're showing me their phone, getting blown up by opponents. 0 from proponents. That's why. And what I think's needed is an organized effort at the grassroots, as they say, of proponents. We can have text on the text line, and me and you can talk about it, but until they feel like their seat, their office is threatened. In other words, if I don't vote for this thing, I'm going to get my picture taken off the wall, is the way they metaphorically refer to it. You're just not going to see any change. And I'm not even convinced that nudging or berating from the president, as he's so good at doing, to those who he believes conflict with his agenda, would move the needle in Mississippi. I think it's that obstinate. I really do. I personally think it's all about race. I really do. And if you look around the state where it's difficult to get ground support, usually I think that's what's at play. Mississippi is a difficult state for this issue and many others because the delta between the components of our population by race is so small. We have a very small margin relative to the other states between the races, the major races. So passing school choice in Iowa isn't that hard, relatively speaking. What's the other one that just passed it last year, Rhino? Was it Wyoming, I think? One of those small mountain western states. They're like 98% white people. And as a result, just because it's a more homogeneous culture, you don't see as much conflict. That's not to say people are racist. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that there is some aversion, I think, in these counties, in these districts that are primarily white folks that are surrounded by poor-performing black schools. We're coming right back. It's time for Fox News, SuperTalk News, then Danielle Morgan.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We are live from the Element Wealth Studio. It's hour 3, the afternoon portion of the program on this
Friday Eve.
We're pleased to welcome now Danielle Morgan, Executive Director of the Mississippi Tourism Association. Hey, Danielle, good to see you again.
Hey, Gerard, you too.
All right, so tell us what's going on. It's summertime. People are traveling around the country, and many, of course, are choosing to visit the Magnolia State here, the hospitality state, as we would say to our visitors. How are we doing there?
Things are going well. Business is picking up. Of course, this weather pattern has not been great for a lot of our partners, but definitely business is ramped up.
Good. The price of gas is down somewhat, certainly since last summer. Are you seeing that have an impact? You're hearing more travelers into the state seeking Mississippi as a vacation destination, a tourist destination, as a result of the lower cost of motor vehicle travel.
Well, I think that certainly always helps, for sure. I think we're seeing, some rising costs in other areas that might offset that. But one thing we learned during the pandemic was people want to travel, and they love to travel, and they need to travel. So it's more of a priority than it used to be, I think. Yeah,
no doubt about it. Anything else affecting travel? Are there any new attractions in the state that are garnering attention and are luring people to Mississippi?
There's a few new things. I think there's always, we're always growing our tourism footprint. Lots of new things opening every day. Of course, the water park down at the Hattiesburg Zoo is one of our newer ones. Again, not the best weather lately for that, but but there's always new things, and we're growing. A lot of things happening on the coast. I can't wait to get down there later this summer and see some of that. But yeah, things are good. We just need it to stop raining on the weekends.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. As a golfer, it seems like every dang weekend we're dealing with rainouts for the golf game. Tell us about this this Heart of Hospitality training program being implemented at the Corinth High School.
Sure. So we've been we're kind of dipping our toe in the workforce space. You know, we're having the same workforce challenges all industries are having, and so one of our ways that we wanted to combat that was give our current tourism workforce a tool to help make sure that they can give visitors the best experience possible. Because as you mentioned, as the hospitality state, we have a higher standard to uphold on the hospitality front. So, and we have also reached out to community college and university partners, as well as some high schools who have tourism programs within their curriculum, and offered this as a free resource to them. And Corinth was one of the first to integrate it into their curriculum. So they had a lot of students. They were graded on it, received their certification. So it was a great partnership. Really proud of that.
Is this something you see being adopted at other high schools in the state?
We certainly hope so. It was really created for the industry, but you know, a lot of the skills are I think we're really lacking in soft skills for a lot of our workforce. So it's a lot of it could be implemented in other areas too. So I think it's about, you know, dealing with difficult situations when you're dealing with the public, recommending things to do in your community. You know, we always, I'm sure you've heard a visitor ask somebody, what is there to do here? And, you know, someone answers, nothing. There's nothing to do here. So kind of showing them how to recommend things, be proud of their community, and also think about who's asking, whether it's, you know, a boomer might want to do something different than, you know, Gen Z. So kind of thinking about that and how you recommend things. That's a part of it too.
Is Mississippi, Danielle, are we receiving any sort of national attention that is perhaps prompting people to decide to visit Mississippi? I mean, are we being exposed in any certain way? Is MTA doing anything that is specifically targeted to attract people to visit the state?
Of course. Well, you know, Visit Mississippi's doing great work with what they're doing and inviting people to the state. Of course, our new headlines on our being in the top 10 for relocation and things of that nature. I think all of those things are working together, all of our wonderful economic development announcements, you know, but I think it's more important than ever that we invest in our communities and make sure we create places where those workers want to live, because ultimately that's what's going to drive the continued success of those projects. We've gotten them here. Now we have to keep them here.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I just wonder if we got so many workers in the state now, in particular, just north of our point here at the AWS construction site. Last I checked, there were about 4,500, many of whom are from out of state. I wonder if a lot of their families are actually coming in perhaps in the summer during the vacation period to, hey, come visit me where I'm working, you know, here in Mississippi.
We certainly hope so, and it's definitely a boost to those local small businesses and economies to have, you know, the hotels full, and also the restaurants and things of that nature. I'm sure some of them are hitting up Top Golf and some of those great attractions too. So it's certainly good for business to have those folks in town, and we're excited to, you know, continue to grow our state and grow our tourism footprint as a result. Because as we say, it all starts with a visit. You know, AWS, I heard it said that they were very impressed by the hospitality in Mississippi, and that was a big part of their decision to come here. So that's a very proud moment, definitely.
Yeah. Now, Danielle, lots of the cities and towns across Mississippi have various themed events that are huge attractions for visitors from outside of the state. Anything going on during the summer in particular that you're paying attention to?
Gosh, there is so much going on this summer. It's hard to keep up with all of it. To be honest, we have a great listing in our Mississippi tour guide that shows kind of all those events around the state. That's a great resource to kind of see everything that's going on. Of course, we have a big cruising the coast coming up this fall, an anniversary there, and America 250. We're hugely we're making preparations to gear up for America 250 to invite people to visit our country as we celebrate 250 years.
Yeah.
That will be next year, of course, but we're already have things underway. They're gonna have a neutralization ceremony on July 3rd to kind of kick that off. So I think that'll be a really special moment to celebrate our newest Americans, and just looking forward to being a part of that. I'm fortunate enough to serve on the commission, which is led by our First Lady, Ely Reeves, and so it's been a fun thing to see all those preparations.
We have such a fantastic, diverse culture in Mississippi that when you come here, you don't see people that all look the same. You certainly don't see cultural practices that are homogeneous in nature and identical. That's what makes the state, I think, so intriguing and should attract folks from out of state that don't get exposed to that often in their own states. Is that your feeling as well? Is that your observation?
I totally agree. I think, almost every region in our state could be its own state
Yeah,
in some
exactly.
respects.
Great point.
And so I think that's unique to Mississippi. So I think there's a little something for everybody, no matter what you're looking for, whether it's the flatland or the Mississippi Sound or even the foothills of Appalachia.
Yeah, the landscape, the food, the nationalities. We're such a tremendous melting pot, the way the state was formed, and that has, of course, just grown and persevered through the years. You can see it all right here in the state.
You can, and we hope people will. We're certainly excited about this year. We know that we've done a lot of marketing push the last several years, trying to make sure that we recovered strong, and that's waning a bit. So we know we're going to see a little flattening from that influx of federal recovery funds, but that's okay. We're going to keep pressing, and we're looking forward to continued growth.
Before we go, is the military park, I think the national park, right, in Vicksburg, is that still a big attraction?
Absolutely. It's actually the largest visited attraction in the state.
Okay.
They see about 500,000 visitors a year. Of course, we've had some challenges on the national park front as we look at, federal funding and all of those things. So we certainly want to continue to advocate. We have 9 national park sites in the state. So.
Wow, fantastic. Well, always a pleasure talking to you, Danielle, and learning about tourism in our state. It's a great state to visit. So people that are listening, even within Mississippi, get about and around the state. A lot to see.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gerard.
You bet. Danielle Morgan, Executive Director of the Mississippi Tourism Association, has been our guest. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Rogers-Dabbs Chevrolet.
Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. So, a new report from the Social Security and Medicare trust funds indicates, the trustees report, it's an annual report, that the programs are going to become insolvent sooner than expected. Now expected to not be able to meet all obligations in 2033. That ain't too long from now, by the way. So it is estimated by the trustees' actuaries that the programs will only be able to pay, Social Security will only be able to pay 77% of benefit obligations by 2033. This is largely driven by two things. One, this ratio of workers to beneficiaries continues to decline at now a faster rate than was previously thought. Just for perspective, in the 60s, 65 I think, in Social Security, the ratio of workers to beneficiaries was over 5 to 1. Now it's about 2.5 to 1 and projected to decrease even further down to about 2.1 to 1.
I saw some go as low as 1.75.
Wow. And so this is
which
largely
would be disastrous.
Not just for Social Security, by the way. So something we've talked about before is the declining birth rate in our country. We just got more people of the age range to start a family that are opting not to for a variety of reasons. You can't point to any one thing and say, oh, yeah, that's it. And so Elon Musk has even warned, we're going to run out of people.
Well, you may not could point to one thing, but you can point to the start of the trend and connect dots all the way back.
Okay, fair enough.
Because, I mean, you can start at the economy and then piggyback that to housing prices and piggyback that to immigration and piggyback that to foreign policy.
I think there's just a general feeling that I can't afford it, so to speak, or I would have to sacrifice a lifestyle I enjoy, right?
Yep.
If I brought children into the world, and it is a sacrifice, but it's a loving, wonderful, rewarding, fulfilling, gratifying sacrifice. I can't imagine.
Well, let's connect the dots in reverse then. We go from foreign policy. Joe Biden tells the world, come on in. We got you. We'll give you everything you need. Just show up. Don't worry about the law. Just get here.
Right.
So you got this massive influx of millions of people, and I'm being exaggerated with Biden. It's been happening for decades. It got way out of hand under Biden. But you have millions of people here illegally, depressing wages for lower and middle class individuals, taking up housing for lower and middle class individuals. So the lower and middle incomes are constantly in competition with people that are willing to, in some instances, do more for less and do without. So in order to get ahead, if you're lower middle income, which the vast majority of young people are, the people you want starting families, now you're looking at the housing. Well, you fast forward from that into the economy. Well, if you can barely afford to house yourself because you're competing with Pedro and Juan, and they've got 12 people in that apartment, so it's even cheaper for them, so their depressed wages don't price them out of it. But the fact that there's millions here when they shouldn't be here has priced you out of it. You're looking at the economy going, I can't afford to have a baby. I can't even afford to barely keep the roof over my head.
I think that summarizes lots of sentiment out there in this respect. So there are lots of things in effect that are causing this. Another one was that, I railed on this last year, this new law, the Fairness Act, which is, of course, inaccurately named. And it's complicated, but the bottom line is it provides more benefits to those who also had other retirement programs and contributed into Social Security, and it has to do with a formula to compute their benefits, right? So we have, for example, certain retirement or employees who participate in certain other retirement programs. The big one that gets referred to all the time is the railroad workers in Texas, That's the one that always seems to get cited as an example of this issue. And it has to do with the amount of years you worked for, in this case, the railroad, where you didn't contribute to Social Security because they're exempt, they have an exemption, versus the amount of years you did not work for the railroad and did contribute to Social Security, and which years are used to calculate your benefits. It has to do with that. Bottom line is, the expenses went up in terms of benefit payments without increasing money coming in. What does that sound like? The Public Employees Retirement System. Now, in fairness, decisions were made 30 years ago, not by the current legislature. They're just saddled with the problem today because the people back in the 90s that made those decisions in Mississippi, it wasn't going to cause a problem. Even if it didn't work out, they knew this is popular. People will like me. I'm going to do this. And folks in this legislature, in this seat, 35 years from now have to deal with this. That's kind of what's going on with Social Security because our Congress has ignored this pending problem for decades because it's not popular. It gets your picture taken off the wall, as they say. But the big news is that nothing new except the latest data from the trustees is that, yeah, we're approaching this point of insolvency faster than expected. That's the news. Just want to get that out there. So it improved a little bit a couple of years ago, but it's now reverted and reversed mainly because of these factors. They passed this Fairness Act last year. The birth rate's declining. People are living longer. You've had inflation, and therefore we've had to have adjustments to the benefits consistent with law, the cost of living adjustment. All this stuff adds up to saying you got a problem here, and now we're looking at 8 years. In 8 years, without action, Social Security will not be able to pay all of its benefits, nor will Medicare, and that means hospitals start collapsing because they're not getting reimbursed adequately by Medicare.
All because a few thousand people, I'll be generous, a few thousand people didn't want to get their picture taken off the wall.
That's a good point. That's absolutely
and refused
right.
to go home because Generation X and onward has been told since we could understand it, and sometimes before we could understand it, we're not going to have Social Security.
So how do we elect people who are willing to make a personal sacrifice, in this case, getting your picture taken off the wall? You may only get elected for one term, make the hard decisions, pass the difficult legislation, you get voted out. But you essentially sacrificed your personal hide for the good of the country, even though your constituents won't see it that way during that short period of time. But on a long-term basis, that's what you're doing. Are there any people out there like that are willing to run for office?
Not at the current moment, but if the Democrats keep circling the drain, and I'm not convinced by the people on social media that are regurgitating the talking point that, oh, USAID funds dried up and now the Democrats can't pay their bills. There's not a direct connection between USAID and the actual DNC. But that being said, looking to act blue, if the Democrats continue to falter and you see Republicans gain more and more ground culturally, socially, and politically, you'll start seeing fracturing within the Republican Party to where you'll have people that will campaign on, I want to go for one term to do this.
Yeah, I agree.
It's definitely not going to be a Democrat.
Sort of the same thing with the scorched earth on on term limits, except it's in reverse. What they're usually doing there is taking care of themselves before they get out of office. We're coming right back. Got a couple of texts to get to, Larry and Mize, and one from the 228. Stay with us.
From the Seabrook Paint.
Middays with Gerard Gibert
It is on.
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Who draws the crowd and plays so loud, baby? It's the guitar man. Who's gonna steal the show? You know, baby, it's the guitar man.
Okay, that's my favorite Brett song, just so you know. David Gates and Brett. So we were talking about Social Security before we went to break. And we got a report from the Social Security and Medicare trust funds, the trustees, about the trust fund, where they now say that the programs will become insolvent. And all that really means, doesn't mean they're broke. It just means they can't make ends meet. Don't have enough money coming in to pay the benefits they're obligated to pay out. Upside down in that respect, to the tune of about 22.4%. I've been saying 23, but to be exact, 22.4%. So imagine if you're on Social Security, whatever your benefit is today, just subtract 22.4% of it, assuming it stayed level between now and 2033. So that's a problem. Larry asks, what can be done? That's a can of worms, as Rhino knows. And I'll tell you this, Larry, just to start, and sometimes Rhino people will be critical of me when I say this because they say, well, that's just obvious. Because it really is that simple. You either got to have more coming in, less going out, or a combination of the two. And I know that oversimplifies it. I get it. Now, how you do that is kind of like saying we need to go to a flat tax. And my response to that is, and what are you going to tax? Well, we're going to tax, right. That's just it. There are thousands and thousands of pages that just define what is taxed, not the tax rates, not the tax calculation. You know how crazy complicated that is. It's the same thing here. I know it sounds simple, more coming in, less going out, but then the details, the devil's in the details, pardon me, as the saying goes. So, Larry, the Democrats say, let's scrap the cap. That's their slogan for their campaign to end the threshold on which of annual wages subject to Social Security contributions. Sitting now at, I think, 172 or 176 a year, something like that. And once you get that, after that, you don't pay into Social Security. So their plan is get rid of that. Scrap the cap, meaning all wages above that threshold would be subject to Social Security taxes. Would that solve the problem completely? No. Would it extend its solvency? Yes. More would be coming in.
You know what would have extended it even further?
What's that?
If the same Democrats that are still in power today had got out of the way of W in 2005.
Agree. Explain to the people
that was
what
the
his plan
last
was.
major attempt to reform anything related to Social Security was Bush's plan to allow for private accounts, private retirement accounts. And Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the know-nothing, do-nothing Democrats did everything in their power to kill it, and it was killed.
It would have required, just like some private sector organizations have done, a significant amount of money transferred to the trust funds to take care of everybody that were in the legacy program as part of the transition, right? But that, to your point, in retrospect, would have been less expensive than fixing it today. It would have been...
And it would have been much more healthy.
For those that could go into the private accounts, that could have private accounts. Right. So it was take a small dose of medicine today or a fire hose of it, which is what we're dealing with it now.
So the lesson is, if it comes to anything serious that isn't related to what your feelings are, just ignore Democrats. They don't know what they're talking about. They're living in la-la land and refuse to come back to reality.
They couldn't stand the idea that the government wouldn't be the apparatus on which so many people rely on for their retirement income. They couldn't deal with that. They've got to rely on me. I know people are saying I'm exaggerating that. I don't think I am.
No.
I really don't. I think they see as their purpose of life is to make government their benefactor, if you will. Yeah, you just got to rely on us your whole life. I can't help but recall the 2016 presidential campaign, Hillary Clinton. I'm probably one of the only nuts that watched the vast majority of her speeches, if you could call them that, rallies. And after every single one, it was the same conclusion. The message was, your life sucks and I'm going to fix it. With government. Now, it would be different if the solution was, I'm going to fix it by getting government the hell out of your life. That wasn't the message. The message is, you need me running your life. That's the Democrat value system, is it not? You must rely on us. So Larry, that's one idea, is to scrap the cap, which would help extend it like another 30 years or something like that. It's not a permanent solution. Another idea, which would be a permanent solution, is to increase the payroll contributions we all pay. That ain't popular. You're not going to get any more out. You're just going to pay more in. Well, that's exactly what scrapping the cap is. They're telling the higher wage earners, you're going to pay more in, but you ain't getting more out. You're just paying for everybody else's retirement. I mean, that's just blatant redistribution. It's welfare. They turn it into welfare like that. One person's paying for the retirement benefits of another. I call that welfare when it works that way, right? Right now, it's more aligned with what you pay in. What the Democrats want is to a small sliver of the population to fund the benefits for everybody else. And that would require increasing, most actuaries say, you'd have to increase the total contribution about 4%, 2% employer, 2% employee, which wouldn't be popular. Nobody wants to pay more into Social Security because remember, you're not getting any more out. You're just paying more in. Another option that I support would be to allow Social Security to, it's kind of a hybrid of what W wanted to do, invest in assets other than the special bonds that pay 3.5%. That's the only thing by law Social Security can invest in. We allow our public employees' retirement systems, and so does every other state, right? And public sector retirement system, other than Social Security, allows them to invest in private assets. They hire wealth managers. I think last I checked, at PERS in Mississippi, their largest equity holding is Microsoft. It's a pretty dang good investment. So it's no different than folks that, like Element Wealth, who sponsors this studio for this program. People would entrust their assets to them to manage for their retirement often. No different. But our law precludes that, prohibits that. I think that's the best thing we could do. We could double like that with a fairly low-risk portfolio. We could double the return to the Social Security. The money you're putting in is being invested that which is left over in S bonds, these special bonds, and that's contrary to the popular belief. We should do that immediately. Allow that. But again, the government, the Democrats in government don't like that. You can't invest in private companies. We can't do that. Why not? My gosh. Think about
how... They wouldn't even get to that. They wouldn't acknowledge that it was an investment into a private company. They would simply keep saying, the Republicans are trying to take away your Social Security.
Or they would construe it as welfare for the private companies or some craziness like that. Imagine what a boom that would be to those of us with private retirement accounts, because all this money would be flowing in to these companies to use to invest and innovate and create jobs and produce.
You can't let that happen if you're a Democrat. You can't let people actually develop some semblance of wealth, because then they quit being a useless mooching Democrat and move over to the Republicans, where you actually want personal liberty.
Man. Well, I'm getting off that rant. Just wanted to pass that on. That actually is some pretty big news that you're not hearing a lot in the mainstream media, but it's all over the financial reports. On the C Spire text line, we had someone that said, I do not think it's a fair statement to say that this is about race, talking about school choice. It seems like a low blow in our state, in particular when racial matters have been historically exploited by outsiders. Could you give examples of districts? Most of the school districts in Mississippi are at least somewhat racially diverse, especially compared to the nation as a whole. This is Van in Ocean Springs. We'll get to that on the other side of the break. We got one segment left today. He also says, I do appreciate the show and thank you guys for doing a good job. We appreciate that. Thanks, Van. We're coming right back.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio. Today on In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar, you'll hear an interview with actor Richard Berg. In a Mississippi Minute with Steve Azar is presented by Superior Catfish. Remember, there's catfish, then there is Superior Catfish. It's U.S. farm-raised catfish with homegrown flavor. Ask for it by name at your favorite store or restaurant. Go to superiorcatfish.com for more info. Gary in the Berg says, wait a minute, what was the population of the U.S. in the early 60s? What is the population now? Better ratio occurred with lower population. Overgrowth of population is not necessarily a good thing. The Laffer curve applies to population as quality of life measure. Yeah, that's really not that much of an issue, Gary. The population has certainly increased since then, but overall population growth, absent immigration, has been fairly static. I mean, the number of those who pass away and the number born has been fairly equal for a while. The issue was that in the 60s, we had fewer people on benefits just because of the population prior to that advanced to retirement. They also lived shorter lives. They didn't consume benefits for as long a period of time. The workforce really is not increasing substantially relative to the amount of people drawing retirement benefits. That's the fundamental problem. By the way, Gary, in the 30s when this thing was created, it was 40-1. And the members of Congress and the president at the time, FDR, who put this thing together, never envisioned a United States that didn't have that kind of ratio of workers to beneficiaries. And remember, it was insurance in case you lived to be 65, because the life expectancy was less than 65 when the program was created. It literally was insurance in case you live past your working years. They called it social insurance before it was called Social Security. So, look, just a little background on that. Back to our texter about the race thing. It's an opinion. I'll just tell you that. The only thing I can tell you with respect to school districts is really, I think, a fairly accurate assessment, and that's districts which are thriving. Generally speaking, oppose choice, and what makes it particularly difficult is that most of the districts that are thriving are adjacent to failing districts or poor performing districts. And while you're right, there is and in this state at least, in our schools, they are racially diverse. The fact is, the breakdown by race, not picking on this particular district, but in Rankin County schools, you know this, Rhino, versus Jackson Public Schools is substantially different, even though a river separates them. In Madison County, the racial composition of the Madison School District is completely different than the Canton School District, which is 99.999% black. And by the way, this is something else I want to point out. Who are an absolute, no questions asked, no on school choice in our legislature? The Democrats. Guess which districts are the poorest performing? Theirs. If you look at the three right now, which are F's and D's, we only have three. I looked it up the other day. West Bolivar, Wilkinson, and Greenville. I looked up the racial composition. It's 98, 95, and 70. Black. Not making a racial comment here. What do you want to bet they're represented by black Democrats? I haven't even looked it up. I'm just guessing. You think I'm pretty close on that? You know they're Democrats. We only have 2 white Democrats in the whole legislature. So they're voting against a better option for districts that are failing, that they represent. They're the ones that ought to be voting for this. They are the ones that ought to be voting for it. But you know what their solution is? You need to give us more money. Have you ever heard them say anything but, you just need to give us more money?
No, unless it's complaining about somebody being racist.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to make that clear. So appreciate the comment there, Van. I just do believe that there is a fear that these high-performing districts would be invaded, subject to invasion by the low-performing districts adjacent to theirs, where most of the student population is black. I do believe that. Somebody else asked about, well, what if we had an overrun? That's what the capacity provision takes care of. Out of here today, back tomorrow. Stay safe, and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.